And if you find yourself being silenced inside of a burning fire and you are not a vampire, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, that is Geoff. It's time for Blindside, gentlemen.
Well, he is a vampire, though.
He's afraid the light's going to set him on fire.
Right, but he is a vampire.
I just thought that he was see-through because, that Scandinavian skin and all.
Is that why he's, dreadfully aware of the location of fires?
I think so.
Okay. That makes so much sense. That just, crushed my mind, dude.
Oh, my God. You're so cheesy.
This week, we are talking about Swedish imports Blindside. You may love them, you may hate them. We kind of like them.
At times, yes, we do.
We do.
Very much so.
I've always been a fan of the band. I like the hardcore punk. I like the hard rock that happened there in the middle. And then the early 2000s thing. I won't say it. Don't make me.
I started to fall asleep as the discography went on.
I read somewhere online that's the onset of diabetes, Geoff. Just falling asleep midday.
Shit, well, apparently not only do I have hypertension, I have diabetes as well and just didn't know it.
He's got hypertension. I might have diabetes. We are old as fuck on Discography Discussion, except Joe, who pretty much looks exactly the same as he did 25 years ago.
And has no signs of It's going to get beeped, don't worry.
So Blindside, literally one of the best bands to come out of that Christian hardcore scene in the late 90s, early 2000s. They really were. Everybody knew who Blindside was that was into hardcore Christian music. They were interesting, much like Extel that came over from Norway. They were kind of exotic a little bit to American audiences. Kids in the suburbs are like, holy shit, I listened to this band from Sweden. They're called Blindside. The dude screams the whole time, even though it's not technically true. It's at the time, it was very energetic. It was in your face. It was tons of fun.
Well, before we start talking about tons of fun, I want to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, so if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening, and now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Oh my goodness. We love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion. Do you know why we love them?
Why?
Because highly reviewed podcasts typically tend to come up in search results. You see, the internet is running on recommendations. Literally everything is a recommendation off of something else. If you pull up your favorite podcast, it'll give you a list of podcasts that are similar or associated in some way with the podcast you're currently listening to. We want to be recommended to whatever you're listening to or whatever your friends are listening to. That's why we ask for reviews. So if you think that we're an awesome podcast, leave us a 5-star review. If you don't think we're an awesome podcast, leave us whatever starred review you feel that we deserve.
Is there a negative 4 stars?
There's not a negative anything.
A negative 4 stars?
Yeah, there should be.
There should be.
What about Death Stars?
What would you like to give a negative 4-star review to, Geoff?
Vinnie Vincent.
Oh, Vinnie Vincent. Do we have to talk about this? We have to talk about this.
Oh, yeah, we got it.
Okay, let's talk about this.
What do I need to play while we're talking about it?
You can play whatever you want. Just don't play Vinnie Vincent Invasion. Please. Vinnie Vincent has kind of a history of flaking out on people.
Kinda?
Okay, by kind of, I mean he completely flakes out on people.
Yeah, it's prolific.
It's kind of his thing.
Yes.
Right? So, Vinnie Vincent is putting on a concert. I mean, maybe. It's going to be an acoustic concert. I mean, the dude is known as an electric guitar shredder, but you know what? Fuck me. Let's just do an acoustic show. Where's the acoustic show, Geoff?
Memphis.
But
I think.
just somewhere in Memphis, right? Because no venue was specified?
Correct.
Wow, okay.
What tickets were supposed to go on sale July 27th.
Yeah, but now they're going to go on sale, well, soon. To be honest with you, I'm surprised he didn't already just, start taking sales.
Yeah, just give me your fucking money and then I'm going to cancel. Sorry, you didn't read the fine print.
Yeah,
I don't have to
sorry.
give it back.
There's a convenience fee. I'm not sure whose convenience it's for, but you got to pay it. Also, there's no concert. Also, it's your fault.
Yeah, it'll be you know what? It'll be the concert that can go with the box set.
Oh, man, I can't wait. I'm still waiting on my box set.
Yeah, well, you didn't get your money back.
I'm just kidding. I couldn't give less of a shit about anything Vinnie Vincent does.
The only box set I'm looking forward to right now is the Blu-ray release of the Batman animated series.
Now, that is a good box set. But anyway, yeah, this whole Vinnie Vincent thing, man, has been a total trip. And, like, I couldn't have given less of a shit about the guy before, but, like, just watching all this stuff in action, like, seeing basically what people have been telling us about him for years, just seeing it play out in real, like, you can't make this stuff up.
Get a bag of popcorn and just watch.
Right. Yeah, just watch it burn, man.
Well, you know, the fucked up thing is that there's still the few handful of zealots out there that are completely obsessed with him that will defend anything and everything that Vinnie does. And they're the funny part. I actually think that Vinnie needs professional help. I think there's some sort of mental health anxiety thing, or he's just delusional that he genuinely needs help with.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I mean, it's a train wreck. It's a shit show, and it's very hard to look away. You know, the only reason why we've become aware of Vinnie Vincent is that he was going to be at the Rock N Pod Expo 2, where we're going to be.
On August 25th.
On August 25th.
At the Nashville Palace.
That is correct. And that's the reason why, you know, we were aware of him. And then he pulled a bunch of shady shit. And I've just been watching all this other stuff go down since then. And this is just the latest thing in a litany of craziness that's come out of his camp.
Absolutely.
So, like I said, you know, the more I watch it, the more, you know, of Vinnie's own words that we see, I really believe that there's a problem that he needs help with. And I think that there's people that are taking advantage of Vinnie that are just milking him for everything he's worth.
Like elder abuse?
Kinda. Yeah. Something like that. I think that somebody needs to be able to step in and take, you know, since we're talking about vampires, take the vampires away from Vinnie. Because I think Vinnie could just go peacefully into the night, which is probably where Vinnie wants to be.
Something interesting that happened this week that I was not expecting. See, I'm a huge fan of the band Tourniquet. And we were talking about Iced Earth recently. And so I was very surprised to see on Twitter that Tim the Ripper Owens is going to be singing on the new Tourniquet album. Very unexpected.
I thought I read that he's going to be doing more than just this album, isn't he?
It just says that he's going to be doing the vocals for the entire rest of their upcoming album called Gazing at Medusa.
Okay. It might have been the wording in the article I read then, so...
You know what? I think it might just be that they're going to see how it goes.
Okay.
And I can't imagine it going south with the Ripper.
No.
I mean, it just can't, right?
I don't know. The only thing I can see going south is the fact that he's been in so many bands. You know.
Wait, which one were you guys again?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're gonna do the Glorious Burden. Let's go from the top. Oh wait. Okay. Ted Kirkpatrick from the band Tourniquet liked our retweet, which was great, as we typically tend to retweet. Take my money.
I have no shame in being a meme at that point.
But hey, Ted, if you're listening, come on the show, man. We'll talk.
We're down to do the interview.
We are down to do the interview. But today, we're going to get down with Blindside.
Oh, with Blindside.
Oh, yes.
Did I blindside you with my drawers comment?
You blindsided me, man.
In 2017, Decibel Geek brought us Rock N Pod Expo in Nashville, Tennessee. This summer, they're doing it again. Rock N Pod Expo 2 on August 25th. Tell us about it, Dan.
We couldn't be more thrilled to be appearing at Rock N Pod this year. In an effort to help support this amazing event, we are throwing in some perks for you guys to help raise the funds necessary to make this event happen. A $35 donation on behalf of Discography Discussion to the Rock N Pod Expo gets you a limited edition Discography Discussion hand-painted beer glass and the option to choose what band we talk about in an upcoming episode of the podcast. This also includes your admission to the expo, access to an exclusive podcast made only for contributors contributors to the event, and we can't wait to meet some of you guys there in person. We'll be hanging out, chatting all day. Keep in mind on these perks, there are only 3 of them available, so act fast, and we hope to see you there. Let's go back to 1997 for tonight's subject. We're going to Sweden, guys, so book your flights early.
Tell me about Blindside, then.
Blindside was a Swedish Christian hardcore punk band. They released their debut album, Blindside, very creative name, guys, on Dayglow Records in 1997. They also got picked up in the U.S. by Tooth and Nail Records, which was pretty advantageous for their career. The Blindside self-titled album is a weird record. There's really no other way to say it. Is it punk? Is it hardcore? Is it nu metal? I don't know.
Neither do they.
It's all over the place, and it's very indicative of, like, we've been jamming these songs in the basement for, like, 14 years, and now we're recording it. And so I think it's tight. I think musically it's on point, but it's a little strange in places, especially the vocal delivery, which is very harsh screaming, and I can't tell. Like, is it supposed to be rapping, or is it supposed to just be, like, really fast screaming? It's kind of both, right?
Well, with that part of it, it totally, like, for me, was a nu metal vibe with that kind of harsh, rhymey delivery that he has. I mean, I could listen to do whatever, pretty much whatever the hell he wanted, because I love his voice. So
yeah,
I really could care less. But yeah, I agree. The delivery is really bizarre.
Well, and part of it is the guitar tone, too. That's where I get the hardcore punk vibe from it. It's a very dry, rough guitar tone, which is fine if you're making a heavy record. There's nothing wrong with it, but it is a little different than a lot of the other stuff that was out in 1997. I'm going to go ahead and lean more on the hardcore side on this one, even though there are weird kind of nu metal rappy parts, but like with none of the accompanying R&B influenced music that you would think would come with rapping, you know?
Right.
Because like on Nerve, he's all like, force me to open my mouth again because you know I don't want to. And you're like, oh, what the hell is going on with this record?
Chaotic to a certain extent. It's definitely an amalgamation of a bunch of stuff.
I didn't hear this album first. I heard Silence. And I made my way backwards through A Thought Crushed My Mind. Thank you, Dan. And then Blindside was probably the last album I ever heard within reason, because, you know, the newest album wasn't out yet. And I was surprised how much like Me Without You, Black Flag, you know, Henry Rollins, and even Iggy Pop and the Stooges I got out of it. I don't know where they got this from. I tried to put a finger on it this week, looking back on the original definition of emo, where there was a lot of talking and then just expelling of what you were thinking. But that's not really what they're doing. I would almost put this album in the same pool as Dillinger with their first couple albums.
I would go that far. I think this sounds like the Refused. I think there's a huge Refused influence here.
Yeah.
Not so much with like the electronics and stuff that the Refused used, but like I think every band in Sweden, especially at that time that was starting out, you know, was at least aware of the Refused.
And probably looking up to.
Correct. There's another band from Sweden that also came out on Tooth and Nail Records around the same time called Self-Minded. And their first album is pretty similar to this as well. So I don't know if this was just like representative of what the hardcore scene was back then. I think I'm probably onto something with that. There was probably tons of other bands that sounded like this that we just never heard.
Well, this was the mid-90s when it was okay to scream in a band and not really be that good at screaming. You know, before screaming had a definition of what was good screaming.
Right, it was like pre-metalcore, you know, like pre-established.
Leftover from thrash.
A little bit, yeah. So there's, you know, I actually really like the screaming on this. It's the clean vocals that I think are kind of weird. Because Christian obviously has a good voice in there. And you can hear traces of that good voice on this record. But like his melodies are a little off, like the song Superman.
He just doesn't have
direction. His melodies are very off-putting.
Somebody's got to tell him or work with him. It's a bunch of dudes that recorded an album together, and they're the ones that are in charge, and they're responsible because they're not exactly sure what to do. Yeah, they needed a big brother, you know, to hold their hand walk them through it and show them the ropes. I think they had to learn it the hard way, and I think that's what we see on this first album is them learning it as they're going along.
Right. Well, that song Superman is so directionless when it starts. It's my least favorite song on the record, even though it was kind of a big hit for them, I guess, if bands like this had hits. And it was kind of like, it starts off kind of boring. He's just kind of like meandering along, singing, talking kind of. Then he goes into this like rhythmic delivery that's kind of like rapping, but I just can't really call it rapping with good conscience.
You can call it Rage Against the Machine.
Right. And then, that's a good comparison, Joe. But on the chorus, he's playing Superman. It's almost like he's making it up while he's singing it, and the melodies just don't hit. Like, I know this vocalist is so much better than what we have on this. And, everybody's got to start somewhere. Some of the weirder songs, like Teddy Bear, like what the hell is going on with that song? Like, it starts off all kind of creepy and melodic, and it's almost like it's very different than the vibe of the rest of the record. But then they just go into this same stuff that they've been doing later on. He's like, I'm here, what happens now? You're here. And he's just like singing it. And then just, I'm no teddy bear, I'm no teddy bear. You're like, what is with this record? Like, it's just weird. It's abrasive. But because I've been listening to it since 1997, I feel like it's kind of an all-time classic for me because there are songs on this record that really do hit. Like the first song, Invert, is awesome. It really sets you up for an experience that you're not going to get necessarily for the rest of the record. I think Invert's really good. Nerve's really good. Daughter is really good. And that's about it. Everything else is just kind of weird, watered-down versions of those songs.
Is this leftover grunge?
No.
It's 1997. We're making our way away from grunge, or not really grunge. I don't care what anybody says. Alice in Chains is not grunge. And we're making our way into the precursors of nu metal. It's starting to be a thing. But on the other side of the planet, Blindside over here in Sweden, I don't know what they're competing with, so I don't know where this comes from. But I hear that style of 90s songwriting, that imitation Pearl Jam in the instrumentation. It can be random at times. It can be focused at times. Everybody can be doing something different. But when they put it all together and say, this is the song, you have to buy into it. Incubus did the same thing back in the day with Fungus Among Us.
That's a pretty good comparison, too, in that, like, it's not that those records sound the same as the Blindside self-titled, but it's very just disjointed and strange and clearly being pulled from whatever their local scene was, if they even had that. I mean, I don't really know what the popularity of a Christian hardcore band from Sweden in '97 was. I don't really have a read on that. However, I consider this one to be a classic and a really good indicator of what we were going to get, and it really does only get better from here, folks, at least for a while.
So let's talk about better from here. A thought crushed my mind.
2000. This one came out on Solid State Records. I think the first one might have come out on Solid State too. I can't remember if it was Solid State yet in 1997. I think it was right on the brink when they started putting the heavier bands on a sub-label called Solid State.
No, I don't think the first one was.
The punk rock has arrived.
Yeah. So you remember whenever I said that, there's 3 really good songs on the self-titled and they really hit and they're aggressive? I don't think that you could get more energy than Blindside between 97 and 2000. These records are pure energy.
One of my favorite punk albums of all time.
Yeah, and A Thought Crushed My Mind is heavy, it's faster, it's more intense than anything on the self-titled. Now, it still has the clean vocals, but they are far improved to what we got on the self-titled. I mean, the self-titled sounds kind of amateurish. And A Thought Crushed My Mind was like, we've got, 3 years of touring under us now, and we've been playing these songs to death, and we wrote these new ones. Christian's screaming delivery is some of the fastest scream vocals I've heard. He fits so many words into the individual bars. Like, it's insane.
Christian was your justification for years about how many words you can do at once.
Right.
How many times did you hear me say, dude, you don't have to say every word?
Yeah, this didn't give me very good lessons on how to deliver in a manner that was pleasing. But I think this is pleasing. I still jam this record whenever I need to get something done. And
I'm glad we agree on that.
yeah, I mean, this record is killer, in my opinion, and it's one of their best. Just because it takes the idea that they had on the first record and actually fully realizes it.
This is just being heavy for heavy's sake. In the timeline of emo and hardcore, this was in the beginning when we were still just being heavy and delivering. Again, leftovers of grunge, where you didn't have this set standard of what your record was supposed to sound like, and the tropes hadn't been introduced yet. Vocalists were being heavy. They didn't follow a template.
Yeah, I really liked Christian's singing on this, too. I mean, the screaming is obviously pretty cool. He was a great screamer and had a really strong voice for it. But his cleans definitely needed some work on the self-titled, and you can tell either he did some work himself. I don't know if this is like vocal coach level of improvement, but we will get there. But this is just raw emotion, but it sounds good. And he doesn't overdo it with the melodies. Like, I was complaining on the first album how a lot of the melodies were like just directionless, and they would kind of come into the verses a little too much, and it would like go into this weird rapping thing. You don't really get that on this record. I mean, the little bit of rapping in the delivery is there, I think. The issue I had with it was that it was super just out of place. But on this record, the clean singing seems to only be reserved for the choruses.
He's not the only one screaming either.
I think it's Simon, right?
So we've got a good balance. We've got a band that's delivering a heavy product in the early days of a style that would be abused.
Yeah, this was still pretty
As
cool.
You Walk just started.
There's a few fun little moments on this thing too, I've noticed. Like on is it As I Walk? That's track 2, right?
As You Walk.
As You Walk.
Yeah, this was a fun one.
That one's got like this kind of weird jazz interlude in it.
Well, we just know why Geoff's listening.
Right. But it was so unexpected and so out of place, but I loved it. I thought it was really cool and different. And I was not expecting it at all from this band because they've really, at this point, only delivered a pretty straightforward experience. So you didn't really notice, you wouldn't think that type of experimentation would be there.
Yeah, it's been nothing but completely frenetic. And then all of a sudden, it's like they totally switched speeds on you. And I would bet, like, I would be kind of curious to see what your reaction was like the first time you heard that.
I thought I was listening to something different. Like, I thought something had changed.
This was the incubus era of Dan's listening, where everything was fungus among us.
Yeah, and science.
So
So I'm kind of used to out-of-place jazz interludes, but not with this band.
Yeah, I was wondering, were you thinking somebody, like, all of a sudden you bought a burned copy and somebody accidentally fucked something up in the middle of a song?
Well, do you remember when you used to download MP3s?
Oh, yeah, and they would it'd say one name and it's definitely something different.
Right, or a lot of the times, in order to fight piracy, the record labels would actually release, like, dummy MP3s that would have, like, the first minute of the song, and then it would just, like, a lot of the times it was just, like, a high-pitched screech or something.
Yeah.
You know, like they were punishing you for downloading it. And so I thought it might have been something like that, but no, but when you really listen to it, the
works.
song would be really boring without it.
Right.
There's a similar break in My Mother's Only Son as well, and that is equally as awesome. It's a super long song, but with the interlude in there, it sounds like it was always supposed to be there. My Mother's Only Son, I don't think is as good of a song as You Walk, just because it's very repetitive. I mean, he spends most of the song just, maybe the one that screams the most, screams about himself, maybe the one that he just says that so many times. So, like, I was actually pretty excited to hear the break whenever we got to it, because I was like, shit. And then the break's over and he goes right back into it, and you're like, God damn it. You know, but,
I don't think it's very long. It's 5 minutes and 43 seconds.
Okay, so it's not Swallow the Sun long, but it is a longer track for this band. Longer songs on this record, more complicated songs too. But I guess probably the standout track on this record, I mean, I think we're all in agreement that King of the Closet was the highlight. of the record.
I get to play it twice, right?
Yeah, Joe is crazy about this song.
I want to do an entire band of just this and call it King of the Closet.
Yeah, this had a video.
Did it really?
Yeah, it's as insane as you can imagine, just based on the song. And just, I'm a vampire, I'm afraid the light will set me on fire. You know, and there was like a whole bunch of controversy on this song, like, because people were like, I don't understand, you know, they're like a Christian band or whatever. Because
why are they talking about vampires,
right,
Uncle Dan?
Right, well, Blindside, you know, is a very Christian band. There's no, you know, that's part of their identity.
But Dan, they're talking about vampires. That's not Christian.
Right, sure it's not. But anyway, I could give you a very Christian explanation as to what those lyrics are about, but I'm not going to.
They can't be visual.
This song was on every Christian heavy music compilation released between 2000 and 2000, really until Silence came out, you know. And it was, people were like, oh my God, who's this band? This is whenever they did a lot of touring in the United States with POD. And that would become pretty instrumental later on. POD had always been kind of trying to break Blindside into the mainstream.
I have POD to thank for my my Blindside exposure.
Well, yeah, in 2001, Christian was on the song Anything Right off of POD's Satellite. And his clean singing was a lot better than we'd heard on this even.
Yes, it was.
And so there was a lot of hype for the band. I remember when they put out the Boom video, it was them playing ping pong against Team Sweden, and Team Sweden was Blindside. Yeah. And then that was like literally right before Pitiful dropped, you know?
Yeah, and I'm going to correct you. It's table tennis.
Okay.
For us serious players over here.
Right, I don't want to offend anybody with
I'm bringing back a classic. Geoff, get out of my house.
Get out of here. You liberal hippie piece of shit.
If you only knew.
I'm going to bring us back to the subject at hand and say, are we good on this record?
This record is awesome. You should check it out. If you are a fan of the heavy Blindside.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
This record is tons of fun. And honestly, if you're not sure between this one and the self-titled, just go with this one.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's close. There's the energy has been focused. That's the best way I could explain it. Because there's a ton of energy on their self-titled, and they're starting to figure it out.
2002 Silence on Elektra Records.
Where did this come from?
Pretty big step up from Tooth and Nail to go to I mean, I know Elektra's defunct now, but back then it was a huge deal.
That was the record label that had Metallica, man. They were number one.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what was number one in my heart.
Are you making fun of me?
Was the song Pitiful, which was the first single released. It had a video. The band was just in a gigantic concrete box.
It was an early 2000s metal video.
It was so much fun. However, this record wasn't as well received by me because you got to think, right now, I'm still, in 2002, I'm thinking that Blindside is still the band that put out A Thought Crushed My Mind. So there was a little bit of hesitation going into this record because it sounded so polished, so clean, so, obviously a vocal coach was involved. Christian singing is 1,000 times better than it had ever been, and they really capitalized on that. However, he still screams, and he kind of eliminated some of that weird rapcore stuff he was doing before.
And that really
helped.
Gone.
That really helped a lot, and it gives his screams more of a hardcore emo edge,
yes,
than they had before, where it was just more straight punk hardcore. And this record absolutely exploded like an atomic bomb. I mean, it was everywhere.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've just killed my voice trying to sound like him on this album.
Oh, I bet your throat was sore, man.
Dude, I don't know how he does it. It's just unbelievable. This is one of my all-time favorite albums. If you're lucky enough to be a Patreon supporter, this is our first Patreon episode, I believe, was Silence.
One of the first, yeah.
And my God, I can't tell you. This album was so important in my life. It meant so much to me, and kind of like how we've talked about The Contortionist, this is one of the few times that I can actually tell you lyrics on songs is on this album. So that should tell you how many times I've listened to it, if I can actually tell you, hammer those nails into your beautiful hands, stuff like that. I never ever can quote lyrics on songs ever, and I can on this album. So it's super important to me. I love it.
We talk about Hope's Fall a lot being the band that was ripped off by the emo artists, but we don't really mention Blindside. Emo had a very similar vocal delivery to what he's doing on this album. And I ask myself, why do I believe this, but I don't believe the bullshit? Sometimes I like listening to Under Oath, but for the most part, I make fun of the fact that, they sing high monotone. Do you know how hard it is to sing high monotone?
Well, apparently it's pretty easy because everybody was doing it. I could never do it, but
so
people did it.
I'm wondering, why do I believe this? Because this is a similar delivery.
This is more akin to the Linkin Park, Papa Roach type nu metal, though, musically.
Right.
You could say there might be a little bit of an emo influence in the vocals, but musically, this was a wet dream for anybody that was really into POD, Satellite, really into stuff like I said, like Papa Roach, maybe even a little bit of Disturbed. It was definitely, in that vein. And that's why they got signed, because that was the hot shit, whenever it came up. But this record is not hot shit. This record is extremely well crafted.
Yes.
And what I mean
Good
by
choice
that
of words
is that the hardcore fan of A Thought Crossed My Mind, or even the subtitled, might hem and haw about the fact that it's not as heavy as the other records were, and that it's not all screaming. There is actually a sizable amount of screaming on this record, but the music, the guitar tone has totally changed. It's like this clean sheen bullshit, but it's not bullshit in the sense that these songs are extremely well written. This is an album that you could criticize for being overproduced until you're blue in the face, but there's no denying the songs. The actual song craft is amazing for what was essentially being set up as a hot band of the week kind of thing. And this record, I think, delivered in a way that nobody was expecting.
This album is the closest I ever feel to God.
Then how come you don't get all the angry emails about when we talk about religion on the podcast?
Well,
you claim to be a Christian, but some of the stuff that you say, but
I'm a terrible influence. But seriously, this album hit when I was at a really, really, really tough time in my life, and my God, it really it's uplifting. I think that's one of the other things I really like about it is that it's metal. And it makes you, feel emotional, especially if you listen to the lyrics. I had recently lost my grandfather at the time, he's my hero, he's my idol, he's who I strive to be in life. So lyrically, a lot of the stuff brought me back, to him. And I think that's the most important thing for me on this album is that connection that I was able to make. It reminded, lyrically, reminded me of the morals and the quality of life that my grandfather lived, and the lyrics on this album made me strive to be and see all the problems that I've had and in my life, especially like stuff like with sleepwalking. I just kind of not paying attention and just veg out, and there's all these things going around me that I could be doing and could be doing better.
Yeah, and not to cut you off, sorry.
No,
did you have
go
more?
for
okay.
it. No.
Well, for me, this record was, like Geoff said, very uplifting. Really made you. I was religious at the time already, so the lyrics kind of were like, oh, okay, it's a confirmation of my beliefs or whatever. But this is also part of like what we've been talking about for a long time about, how post 9/11, most bands that were to survive the nu metal blackout, that for whatever reason 9/11 did a lot of damage to nu metal. And part of that is that the bands that survived were the PODs and the Blindsides and bands like that because they had an uplifting message. And, this was Christian rock at a time when they finally started deciding that, like,
It was okay.
It wasn't cool to, shove religion on people's throats. So what you actually are getting here is not some like God's going to judge you type of metal, because there's a lot of Christian metal out there that's very judgy and very intense and a little over the top, in my opinion. But this was more like, no, we believe in God, and this belief is what has carried us through dark times, and it was very relatable on a real life level. Whereas I think before that, either a Christian band wasn't taken seriously, but I think post 9/11, everybody was looking for a little bit of hope, and Blindside had that.
They did. I think it's rock, pop rock, but Switchfoot is another perfect example.
But people would have called it metal in 2002.
What?
Something like Silence.
Oh yeah,
people were calling.
No. I was saying, that on a poppy rock aspect, Switchfoot is another example of
right,
a band.
that we were meant to live for so much more, like that kind of,
Yeah, I mean, that became...
Only song on that record that sounds like that.
No, I know, but if you go and listen to, like, their stuff after, I'll have to pull it up because I haven't listened to it in a while, but a lot of their stuff went mainstream, and then it wasn't until just 2 records ago that they finally started to get back to a little bit darker, a little bit more intense.
Yeah.
Again.
I mean, with Blindside, and it's kind of like Blindside, POD, Pillar came out around that time that was doing a very similar thing. And it's not that what Blindside was doing was unoriginal, because I think that Silence is a better record than all of those bands put out those years.
Agreed.
Like we all thought that Disturbed's Believe was really good, but it was kind of the same sort of thing. Like they were approaching religion in the only way that Disturbed knew how to approach it, But this record was hopeful. It was melodic, it was heavy, it was dark, and it was real for people. I mean, it's hard. If you listen to the acoustic song Silence at the end of this record and don't feel anything, like, you're dead.
Yeah, you have a cold heart.
Yeah, you are totally frozen from the inside out. There's,
I tried to tell you I was a vampire.
Right. So I think this introduced the band to worldwide acclaim. They were a really big deal for a long time because of this record. And to a lesser extent, the next one. What was this? 2004's About a Burning Fire?
Oh, I have the storms back on the podcast, Dan.
Oh, no. It was like, 1 week?
In my heart, it happens every time.
You can hear us talk a little bit more about Silence on our Patreon episode that we did specifically on the album Silence.
$1.
Yeah, $1. $1 is the minimum. You can give more if you want. You don't have to.
You want to give more.
Patreon.com/discussmetal.
Okay, well, that's enough money grabbing. Talking about a burning fire. Is this record stylistically that different from Silence?
No.
I don't feel happy after listening to it.
Yeah, there's some songs that are really good on this record. Eye of the Storm's an okay opener. And I say it's only okay because it's not anywhere close to the energy that we had on the beginning of Silence. Which was just kind of a gut punch, where About a Burning Fire starts off and it's more melodic. Christian singing is actually objectively better than it was on Silence. Like he goes places vocally on this record that he's never gone before. And it sounds really good, but there are definitely songs that I have issues with. One of the biggest ones was the song that starts, I don't even remember what the name of it is because I always skip it. It's like, can you help me out, Geoff? I think it's it starts with like SH.
Shekinah, I think?
Shekinah, yeah.
Okay.
Hate that song because it's so out of place. Like, I'm all for experimentation. Then I go into like...
Hooray, it's LA. That's what's right after.
Well, there's that.
I tried to figure out what the hell was going on, but I didn't get it.
Well, I don't know. Like, this is not... I'm not going to go on a big rant about it, but like, what the hell were they thinking? Like, this song just doesn't fucking work. And it's sandwiched in the middle of an album that's okay. Hooray, It's LA didn't like change my life or anything, but it was at least more or less in the same... sort of in the same vein. I don't know. I don't know what to say about a band from Sweden that started off as a Christian hardcore band singing songs about fucking LA. But whatever. I didn't dig it. One of the best songs that I did like on this record was Follow You Down. I thought that sounded like something that could have been on Silence. It starts off heavy. But there was something a little weird about the playing. Does it just seem like the energy level in what they're playing is just so subdued.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. That's part of the reason why it doesn't make me happy listening to this album. It's just like,
yeah, I just had this vision of a producer like running in, like they probably get into the studio and start jamming like the old stuff or something, and then the producer runs in and is like, "You guys all need to calm the fuck down."
It's the same producer from Silence, though.
Yeah, like Follow You Down is good, and I'm trying to really think of another really good song on this record, and it's hard.
Eye of the Storm doesn't count.
Eye of the Storm's an okay opener. Yeah, but it goes on a little too long. All of Us was a really big single, and it was okay. But it's like, you've got Christian is now gone from being like a hardcore screamer to kind of more of a smooth vocalist. But like this is almost like you're like pop crooning now. And it's definitely a step away from, I think, what the fan base wanted. And maybe they didn't give a shit about what the fan base wanted.
Give me that money.
But yeah, they're like, man, we could take this guy's voice anywhere we want. And they did. They definitely took it up a notch. But to me, the more sleek it sounds, the less real it starts sounding. And that was the biggest issue I had with this record, is that the vocals were so produced and the music itself was so like somebody tranked them, that like I just couldn't really get into the songs, because now you can't even really call this metal. This is the transition from being considered a metal band or a heavy band to being pop rock.
Yeah, it's alternative pop rock.
And that bothers me. Now, at the end, they did throw on a song called About a Burning Fire, which is like 2004 Blindside trying to make their best approximation of what they think they used to sound like before they put out Silence. I think it can fool the casual listener to be like, yeah, man, they're going back to their roots on this one. But like, really listen to it. It's still not even close to anything on A Thought Crushed My Mind, or even on the self-titled, or even some of the heavier songs on Silence.
Right.
It just doesn't really hit the way they thought it would hit. And I think, honestly, they thought that the fan base was going to be pissed off when they heard this record, possibly. So they threw this song on at the end where he's like yelling and screaming over it. But again, it's so well produced and so pop sheen that it doesn't hit the way it's supposed to hit.
More bands,
my opinion,
need to practice with a fucking metronome. Here's why. When you take a band that thinks it's all about the energy, and they all hang out in the basement together and they write A Thought Crushed My Mind, they lock in so much on the idiosyncrasies of each other's playing and the discrepancies, because drummers and guitarists and bass players and even vocalists run off on a fucking tangent and then come back, and you're allowed to fluctuate and change the time signature, guys. You can play fast and then play slow. If you really listened and counted the Black Album by Metallica, you'd be surprised to find out how many tempo changes are actually in those songs. They're subtle, but they're there. The point being, when you take a band like that in the early 2000s and you put them in a studio with a producer who may or may not be a fan of their work, they're going to do the studio thing. They're going to tell them you're playing to a metronome. And for most bands, that takes out all the energy. It doesn't have to. But if you'd been practicing that way the first time, it would be a familiar feeling. Automatically, we feel like we're playing slower. But if you actually, turn the damn thing on at practice and wheel it up to 144 and find the tempo where the energy is, all of a sudden you go into the studio and you're used to playing that way, and the energy follows. Thankfully, that is a trend that disappeared in the late 2000s.
It just bothers me as a fan that a band would do something like this, in the sense that, again, hi, I'm Unpleasable Metal Fan. Have we met?
Ladies and gentlemen, Unpleasable Metal Fan.
Hello. Great to be here, guys.
Did you find what you were looking for this week?
I'm pissed off that they went to pop rock. I think I've been very clear about that. But I'm like almost more pissed off that they made a song that they thought was going to appeal to me specifically. Like, first of all, that's like one track out of like, what, fucking 10 or 11?
Are we counting the song you don't like?
No.
Okay, then yeah, it's about 11 songs.
Good. So this song is very like them trying to make some kind of compromise, like some kind of peace offering to Unpleasable Metal Fan. Want to let you know, Unpleasable Metal Fan does not appreciate peace offerings. Because, again, this is what 2004 Blindside thinks that 1998 Blindside sounded like. And it's not the same because all the energy, like, it's almost like a fucking toilet bowl. It starts off with a really strong swirl, but after a minute or so, maybe I need to have my toilet fixed, but after about a minute or so, all of that energy is just drained down the fucking toilet bowl. And there's nothing left. He's like, I thought about your love. Only way smoother than that. You know, you see, and then he basically pukes out a scream at the end of it, and the whole thing just leaves me feeling fucking empty and dead inside.
It just dredges along.
So are you saying you didn't find what you were looking for this week?
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, Unpleasable Metal Fan.
Have a good week, guys.
2005, The Great Depression.
So this was not, as far as I know, this was not released on Elektra Records. Either Elektra Records didn't exist or they let Blindside off. This, as far as I know, was considered an independent release by the band.
Yeah, DRT Entertainment. I don't know who the hell that is.
Yeah, so they did this themselves.
Are you happier now that you have The Great Depression?
A little bit. And that's the most truthful answer I can give, because this is very much the same band that put out About a Burning Fire. And there's no doubt about that. However, this is where I started getting keyed in that maybe Christian had a little bit of help vocally on Silence and on About a Burning Fire.
Some studio magic?
Yes, because on this record, just having limited studio time and not having unlimited studio time and being able to do a part over and over and over and over again until it's perfect. Demon Hunter. So what you're getting with this is you're getting a little bit more bare bones approach. Now, they're still trying to write poppy songs. There's no doubt about that. However, Christian doesn't sound quite as good or quite as sheened as he did on About a Burning Fire.
The performance is the same to my ears, but the microphones are not. And this was definitely the early 2000s where not every studio had $10,000 microphones. Most of them had Rode NTKs, and that was all anybody used, if that good.
And the performance is more or less the same, but it is much more impassioned, and that's actually what I like about it. I like that it's a little bit more seismically like Blindside.
You can just say it's like Blindside.
No, like Silence, though. It's a little screamier in places. It's a little bit more spastic, which is something that they were known for prior to About a Burning Fire. So it really was, if you wanted to call this a back-to-basics approach, it very much is that, but there's a lot of newer elements in there that weren't there before. So what you have on this record is slower songs for the most part, but they're slow and dirgy. Well, they're depressing. There's a few high-energy songs, like maybe 2 or 3, but the singing doesn't soar as high, and he actually falls short in a few places and even goes out of key a few times. But what I liked about this is that you had very insightful lyrics that were about the band's trip to Africa, and they just saw kind of the pain and the poverty that existed in some of those countries. And all of that reflected with the making of this record, right down to having an individual story, which Geoff is going to tell us about.
Yeah, I don't know the exact specifics. I know if you really want to go down the Google rabbit hole, you can find out exactly what happened. But I know on Yamkela, they wrote about an individual that they met that was dying, essentially. It was a young boy.
He was a kid.
Yeah, he was a kid. And it really struck them. They wrote about it, about the impending death. And then as they're, touring or something, they actually end up, the kid is at one of their shows after the fact. And, it was one of those like, oh my gosh, you're alive kind of moments, the freak out moment. And that's the kind of stuff that's kind of cool about this album is that, as Dan has said, is, that impact that trip has had and the influence it had on the music. And I might like albums that are like that, because Sunny Day Real Estate has an album called How It Feels to Be Something On that has a very similar vibe because of an experience, that's life altering, because you're seeing honestly, what is known now as first world problems, and you realize, well, shit, life really isn't that bad. We think it is, but it could be a whole lot worse. And then when you get exposed to it, it really tends to change a person.
Yeah. This record is very dark. Probably the darkest Blindside album out there.
I got the same feeling listening to this that I get when I listen to Polar Similar. It sounds like an audio representation of real human tragedy and explanation as to how bad things really aren't.
I think there's some very real things going on in this record. And I really enjoy the fact that his singing isn't quite as good and not as polished. And either that was an intentional choice or he just had so much studio help on the last two records that there was no place for it.
It feels real again to you, is that?
It feels very real and very cutting. And there's actually a song that I tear up on towards the end of the record called When I Remember.
No, I think that's the last song.
Because he's basically talking to God, and he's like, that he's depressed and lonely and doesn't have anywhere to go. And he says, but then I remember who I am and I remember who you are. And there's that kind of that same hope that we were talking about in Silence. And yeah, it's religious. It might sound cheesy or whatever, but it really hit me on a personal level and was a huge highlight to me. And again, it's kind of out of my wheelhouse because this isn't metal by any stretch of the imagination. This is a dark, broody pop rock album. And it has a lot of different elements. I like that he goes into the screams more, and then it's a little chaotic then. You get little hints of the old Blindside in there. And I definitely like hearing that. But this is a predominantly clean vocal kind of affair. And if you're not ready for it, it could definitely drag you down a little bit emotionally, but I feel like it picks it back up towards the end of the album.
Yeah, it definitely caught me off guard. I mean, I know it was I was hoping that now that it was no longer a major label release, they'd get back to their bread and butter, and to a certain extent they did. But I didn't realize how depressed I was going to be after listening to it.
Well, they warned you.
Yeah, they did. I wasn't quite expecting it. I know sometimes people say those things tongue-in-cheek or they're joking. Nope, they weren't joking.
There's a song on here called Fell in Love with the Game. And he basically just like screams the chorus, I fell in love with the game and I forgot your name. And there came a point where he's like, and we were kicking and gouging in the mud and the blood and the beer, which is a Johnny Cash reference to a song called A Boy Named Sue. But again, it didn't come off cheesy like that. Like, it really felt like that was the most important, like, real thing that they could have said. And it's definitely a song about being at the end of your rope. And there's not a positive resolution to it in that song. And I just loved everything about that song. And I loved the energy that they brought with it and the realness. But, the metal fan in me was still a little bit like, man, this record isn't the same Blindside. Like, we no longer... The Blindside that existed all the way up until Silence is dead. Like, that band doesn't exist anymore. From here on out, we are stuck with the About a Burning Fire Blindside.
Are we still a Christian band at this point?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about the stigma that goes along with being a Christian band, where you can't put out a record or a song that doesn't have a positive resolution. Dan would argue that sometimes it's okay to tell the story that lets that person know they're not alone, even if it doesn't have a positive resolution.
I think anybody that wasn't there and didn't write the album and didn't experience what they experienced can shut the fuck up, is what I would argue.
You've gotten that pushback. Well, how can you write this song without a positive resolution?
Yeah.
Well, the song doesn't have to have a positive resolution. That's not the message of the song.
Well, those people are idiots. They just want to live in this like religious bubble where everything's happy and sunshine and rainbows shoot out of their ass. And that's not what I'm about. That's not why I listen to heavy music or dark music. It's because I had some heavy and dark shit happen to me over my lifetime, and this is what I relate to. So, this record was mission accomplished on that.
So you would agree then that it's okay for the message to not always be positive.
I don't think there is a message necessarily on this record. I think with Christian music, there is this idea that there's supposed to always be a message or some kind of prevailing thing. But, like, you know, I don't talk to other people that are religious that, you know, well, every time they're speaking to me, they're trying to push something on me. That's, like, literally the most negative thing about religion and why people hate it and reject it. So, and I don't feel like Blindside has ever done that to me as a band. Like, I don't feel like they're trying to sell me a line of bullshit at any point, you know? And this was just a very real experience, and whether or not it's okay, if you're the kind of person that lives in a world where you're trying to decide whether or not something's okay or not okay, you need to not be listening to metal. You're in the wrong mindset. You've already started off on the wrong track.
How they live their life and using their life stories, you know, lyrically in their songs. I don't think they, to me, they don't come off as pushy. They come off as honest. You know, that's what I get out of it. I think that, and I think that's why they're successful. Instead of, you know, cramming it down your throat, they just say, hey, this is it, you know, take it or leave it, you know, that's perfectly fine.
So it's kind of a shame, right? That's all great. They've basically done pretty well
right
up to this point. This is 2005. You had two pretty decent first two albums. You had a fantastic third album. Your fourth album was kind of meh, but it seems like you're starting to pick steam back up when you get to the Great Depression. And then the band just goes AWOL for 6 years.
I honestly thought they were done.
Well, in a certain sense they were, right? Because with Shivering Hearts We Wait, not to quote our good friend and collaborator on the show, Steven Sarro, I can't listen to this record and think of it as anything other than absolute shit.
Damn. I'm glad we're in agreement. I was afraid we weren't going to be.
It starts off like, oh yeah, we're Blindside, but it's like starts off with this like, I don't know, like this like weird syncopated AC/DC bullshit. Like it's just like they weren't gonna go back to the arenas on this record. I don't think they did go back to arenas.
No, I don't think they did. And if they did, it was only in Sweden.
Yeah, because this is just a pretty short record of pop rock songs that really don't hit me on an emotional level at any point.
Wow, this record really is only 37 minutes long.
It's really short.
Yeah, super short.
I just nothing really connects with me. Monster on the Radio was their big hit. I know that got played on like Swedish radio for a while, like it was a big deal for them, but this just doesn't really sound like Blindside to me, and I'm just not really into it at all. Like,
did we take a break for 6 years and decide to make a record again?
Basically, yeah. I don't know if my last rent check bounced or something, or you know what the deal was behind it, but this was a record where they were really trying to catch that fire that they had on About a Burning Fire and Silence, and it's just not there. I don't hear it. It lacks the realness of the Great Depression, in my opinion, and it really just, I don't know if this is the same band that put those previous records out who listened to this and was like, this is great. Cut, press.
It's almost like they had a little bit more on a record deal that they had to finish up.
Something like that, yeah.
But then I look at it, I'm like, nope, it's a different label. And I'm like, oh, wait, well, maybe this label bought the rights because the DRT went defunct in 2009. And this came out in 2011. I mean,
no, you're right. You're right. Sometimes if another company buys the assets of the label or whatever, that there could have been something like that. Now they did put an EP out between this record and About a Burning Fire called the Black Rose EP, but as far as I'm concerned, that one's pretty much absolute shit as well.
Right.
I'm not connecting with these songs at all, and it could just be that after 6 years, I'm just not emotionally connected to Blindside anymore. Like, they were a band that I liked when I was younger, and then now they're back, but they're not really back. Like, there's like some weird Skillet shit going on this record, and I'm not into it.
I don't have enough invested in this album to say one way or the other. Other than the fact, I think some of the stuff is pretty cheesy. Like the whole like which one are we listening to now? The whole synthy orchestra and
yeah, it just doesn't work.
This is the opening track. There must be something in the water.
There's shit in the water, guys. You need to drink different water. like right now, or you're gonna die. Oh shit, this was 7 years ago. Fuck.
We're all gonna get dysentery or giardia or.
Is this why there's not a new Blindside record? Because there was shit in the water? I hope not. But yeah, this is just like, I mean, this is a hard pass. I mean, I listened to it once when it came out, and I listened to it once for this episode. And I'm done. Like, there's nothing that caught me. Because I thought, once I really got into the Great Depression, and I was like, okay, I was really heavily emotionally invested in this album. Even though the music wasn't heavy as what I'm used to listening to, I'm okay with it. And then I hear this one, and I'm like, well, maybe it's going to catch me, too. It did not catch me.
I wanted to like it, just like how I've liked it pretty much all their other stuff, even if it's just been somewhat liked. They've always had like a special place on my heart because Silence was just so profound for me. So I've been willing to give these guys a bigger pass than I have with other bands, and I just couldn't do it on this one. The funny thing is, I think this one got like really good ratings, like reviews. Got really good reviews.
It did. And I don't know if it's just because everybody forgot or what.
I think it's because this was Blindside, and oh look, everybody, Blindside's here.
Well, I mean, he screams a little bit on this record. Like it's like there's places where they try to make it sound really Blindside-y, but it just doesn't. It's almost like an era has passed or something. I mean, sometimes bands can make a comeback and it'd be really great, and it's like they never left. It's very obvious that there was a 6-year gap in songwriting between this and the Great Depression. That's just like my correct opinion.
Did they do anything like side projects or anything?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because I'm wondering like maybe their heart isn't, another place.
It's shivering.
Because I just don't believe it. I mean, so I'm just wondering if they're focusing their emotion and their talents elsewhere, and this is just something they had to do.
Right. There's no way that these songs were sitting in the loaded gun for 6 years. There's just no way. I think they went into the studio and wrote this album. And I've seen it happen with bands before where they go into a studio and write an album like right there in the studio, and it all sounds really good because everybody was part of it and everybody kind of turns into their own yes men. But this just didn't connect, and I see why they thought it was going to. And again, our opinions are always like a little opposite of whatever the general populace thinks. I think a lot of people love this record. If you're a fan of Christian rock, this is a perfectly acceptable record in that genre. And that is literally as nice as I can be to it. Like I said about In Flames, there's nothing really about this record that cuts you or makes you feel convicted or gives you that feeling in your balls that you're listening to something real. Nothing like that on this record. It's just another pop rock record by a Christian rock band. And it sucks because this is Blindside we're talking about. They made such a big impact whenever they got huge. But it's like the delivery, they haven't really delivered on the promise that Silence had. They get there a little bit on the Great Depression, but again, that's a very different type of record in their discography. And as far as I'm concerned, every band's allowed to have that one record that's different. But to get, to get something like this after a 6-year wait, I mean...
This hurts them more than it helps them.
Yeah, I would have hated.
Absolutely.
I would have hated to be a fan that was holding on, the drip feed, waiting for this to come out. Because there's no way if you're a hardcore fan of the band already that you're going to listen to this and be like, oh, I thought it was really great. It's the best Blindside album yet.
There's 2 different fans for every independent band that gets signed. The fan of their mainstream releases and the fan of their independent releases. So if you're fan A, you want another Silence. You want some more Eye of the Storm. If you're independent fan, you want A Thought Crush My Mind, or maybe even The Great Depression. I wonder if both of those fans would have been satisfied if they'd gotten exactly the opposite of what they were asking for. Because this isn't even close to what they had originally. I hear little pieces of what they would go on and do later, but I'd be a little disappointed if I was looking forward to this.
You know what I find so offensive about this record, really, though? Is that thin-ass guitar sound.
You mean that Showbread, No Sir, Nihilism is not practical?
No, because it worked on that record, another record that was heavily influenced by The Refused. But it doesn't connect. It doesn't connect with me because there's no aggression to it at all. And, again, I'm that guy that I guess just likes music that's aggressive.
You're not the only one. I mean, I think everybody in this room likes aggressive music. I think pretty much everybody who listens to our podcast likes aggressive music.
That's why we do a metal podcast.
Exactly. And it's just straight into, I mean, they just feel like they're lost and they don't care. And that's okay. I mean, I'm all right with the fact they haven't released a new album in 7 years, 8 years?
Yeah, like I said, well, I'm glad I didn't have to listen to another one.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm kind of afraid of. What is this more? If they did release something else, would it be more of the same?
Probably.
I think it's time to say, Geoff, final thoughts on Blindside.
Started out a little weird, a little crazy for me, but loved the energy, loved the screams. Silence hit, and it's about as spiritual as you'll ever hear me on this podcast, because I'm being honest, in the fact of how it makes me feel. Nothing, just to me, Silence is about as perfect as a studio album as you can get. I mean, yes, I know it's maybe a little too polished for some people, but I love it. I love the message. I love the songs. I love just about everything about it. And, The Great Depression is probably number 2 on my list. And it's mainly because it is kind of depressing, and I guess that's the angle they're getting at. I like the story behind a lot of the songs. I like the lyrical content of that. But I think I hope they're retired. I don't want anything else, because the last album kind of sullied my memory of them, and I don't want that to happen anymore.
Dan, what about you?
The first 3 albums are pretty much solid gold as far as I'm concerned. Even with the shortcomings of the first album, it was still a legitimate effort from the band. Check out The Great Depression. You might like it. If you don't, that's okay. You just don't have to go past those first 3 albums.
Blindside is one of the most fun and one of my favorite bands to listen to. I will not let one album at the end of their career ruin them for me. As far as I'm concerned, The Great Depression was a good place to go out. And if you're a fan of punk, hardcore, even emo from the early 2000s, grunge, you're going to find something in this band that you like. And I think everybody should start with Silence and work their way in both directions. If you're like us, you're going to get to album number 6 and say, yeah, I'm done with it too.
Thanks, but no thanks.
But I think you're going to find something that you love in Blindside, just like we do. We got some feedback, Dan.
Yeah, we got a review on Apple Podcasts. And this is from Iron Anthony. It says, hey guys, just listening to the Sepultura episode, it's cool listening to how much you guys love the older stuff and being very clear on Max's pivotal and creative years. Max is my father-in-law, and it's very cool to listen to true fans speak so highly of him. You guys should really do a Soulfly episode. I have a feeling you guys will lose it when you hear the new album Ritual. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
Well, how about that? Max Cavalera's son-in-law, so
there you go.
Maybe when that new Soulfly album drops, we might talk to Max Cavalera. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's something that could happen. So
you're not going to say it's going to happen. You're not going to say it's not going to happen.
I'm not committing to anything at this exact moment.
Way to be Dan Terry about it.
It's all I can do. It's who I literally who I am.
We got a tweet from AC, Alt 1, in regards to episode 74, Disturbed. You gents were more gentle and objective than I thought you would be. Not that you're not normally objective, but it's just so easy to use Disturbed as a punching bag.
Oh, it so is.
Kudos. Also, agreed. In Flames, clam down, Dan. Cover of Land of Confusion is hot garbage. I believe we said that on the In Flames episode. And took special attention to say it again on the Disturbed episode.
I don't want to talk about In Flames.
Geoff, what's your album of the week?
All right. I'm going off the rails just a little bit. There's a video for one of their songs that has the animatronics from Showbiz Pizza in it. And I loved that place as a kid. And that is Oracular Spectacular by MGMT. It's a great fucking album. Yes, I know it's not metal.
Dan, what about you?
Dark Roots of the Earth by Testament.
Gee.
I wonder why.
That's real hard for Dan.
I spoiled my own pick because I brought them up on the episode. No, sir, Nihilism is not practical by Showbread.
Great album. Check it out if you haven't.
And if you have, go listen to it again.
Yeah, we'll have to do a Patreon on that one pretty soon.
When are we doing a Showbread episode?
Well, we can do a Showbread episode, but
I'm going to need Brandon to come back and help us with
your
that.
mileage may vary.
Spoilers. And on that note, this has been episode 75 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your money.